So thank you for inviting me for this series of 3 talks on the Noble Eightfold Path. So today we're going to look at the first part, which is basically about the wisdom sector, which is right views and right thoughts. Okay, but today I'm going to do it slightly different. I'm going to go through with you some of the key points or key paragraphs in this wonderful book written by Venerable H. Gunaratana. I think some of you may be familiar with him or have even met him. He's, well, he's quite old now, so I don't think he's been traveling much, definitely not for the past 2 years because of COVID. He was also at the Buddhist Mahavihara in the, I think in the 60s, and the one who actually started the Buddhist correspondence course. And I think I could recall that my first introduction to Buddhism was actually through one of his correspondence course in the early 70s. And today he's in the United States, but he's written this very wonderful book. It's called 8 Mindful Steps to Happiness. It's actually a book that talks about the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the topic for our discussion today and for 2 other sessions. So this book, the reason I thought is good that I introduced this book to you is because the session is pretty brief. We're going to talk about Eightfold Paths, 8 steps, all right, in 3 sessions, and I think it's 9:20, so I'll probably have about 40 minutes to speak to you. So I will not do justice to actually in describing to you the all 8 aspects. So I thought the best is after I've given you a brief introduction to this, you have got a source that you could refer to, and this is one of those very wonderful books that I hope you will have access to. Basically, this book delves deeply into each step of the Buddha's profound teachings, which we call the Eightfold Path. I think you know that the Eightfold Path actually is the 4th of the 4 Noble Truths, right? In the first teaching that the Buddha gave, called the Setting in Motion the Wheel of the Law, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Buddha talks about the 4 Noble Truths. And the 4th one of the 4 Noble Truths is actually what we call the Eightfold Path, which is divided into three sections, if you like: the wisdom part, the morality part, and the concentration part. And if you are familiar with the Eightfold Path, you know that the Buddha actually starts his teachings for us to understand what is right view. So having an understanding of right view is paramount, because from that the rest actually flows. Okay, so in this book, what I find very useful is that Bhante Ji, as we like to call him, but Bhante Ji offers very specific advice on how to handle very practical issues like anger, our greed, our defilements, and then how to practice right livelihood, and how do we practice what he calls loving friendliness. I think we are familiar with the word metta, which we usually translate as loving kindness, right? Bhante Gunaratana, he translates as loving friendliness from the word metta as friend. Okay, so in relationship with our parents, with the children, if we have children, with our partners, as well as with our working relationships. And he also talks about how do we learn to overcome all our mental hindrances that prevents happiness. So I think this is a great book. If you could get hold of your, can get hold of it. You can buy it directly from Wisdom. I think it costs about US $16.95, excluding postage. So, or you could get it from one of the local bookshops. Okay. So today, basically, this part of today's talk, I think 2 things are very important for us to remember. First is that every action has consequences. All right. So there's a first key point to remember what Bhante Ji is going to explain in his book. Every action has consequences. And this is where he brings into the topic of cause and effect. And from cause and effect, we know the topic of karma. Okay. Now, the second part of today's talk will be to describe to you that actions can be skillful or not skillful. Now, I've used Bhante Gunaratana's terms for the word kusala and akusala. I think many of you are familiar with the word kusala. You have translated it as wholesome or good or, helpful. So Bhante Gunaratana have translated it as skillful. That is why the title for his book is called 8 Mindful Steps to Happiness. Okay? So we're going to talk about what are the actions that are considered as skillful and what are the actions that are not considered as skillful for us to have a right view of these actions. And these skillful actions manifested through our body, through our speech, and through our mind. Okay, so that's a brief overview of what today's talk is going to be like. All right, so I'm going to go to the first slide. This is from Bhante Ji's book called The First Step. Right, in his book, The First Step. I will also mention the page there. If you, at some stage later, you get hold of this book, you want to make reference to it. This is what Bhante Ji has mentioned here. He mentions about what is called the middle path. He says the Buddha's message was simple but profound. So it's a very simple, very direct message, but it's profound, it's very deep. Okay? Neither a life of self-indulgence nor one of self-mortification can bring happiness. Now, what do we aspire for? I think all sentient beings aspire for happiness, isn't it? In the Dhammapada, I think we remember that phrase where the Buddha mentioned, all beings tremble at the thought of death. All beings tremble, are fearful of pain, of death. So we all want happiness, isn't it? We all want happiness. And here the Buddha mentioned, neither a life of self-indulgence nor one of self-mortification can bring happiness. So these are extremes. And he says only a middle path, avoiding these two extremes, lead to peace of mind, leads to wisdom, and complete liberation from the dissatisfactions of life. Now, the word here, middle path, as later the next slide will explain to you, we must be careful not to think that middle path means not doing like neither here, not there, like sitting on a fence, right? It doesn't actually mean that. So here, middle path actually is actually what is called as the path to happiness. So the message of the Buddha is traditionally known as the Four Noble Truths. So the last of these 4 truths sets out the 8 steps to happiness. So what is called the middle path is a path which teaches us how to cultivate skillfulness. In other words, how do we cultivate something that is useful, if you like the word useful, all right? In our understanding, in our thinking, in our speech, in our action, in our livelihood, in our effort, in our mindfulness, and in concentration. So you can see all these things we need to cultivate. All right, but which one do we start first? Many people in the West, for example, are very fascinated with Buddhism, and they look at Buddhism only from one aspect, the meditation aspect. Well, that is good, but that is inadequate. So as many great teachers will tell you, you may spend months or years doing meditation, experiencing calmness, serenity, but if you don't have right understanding about the nature of existence, about reality, that's not going to take you very far. Okay? So that's maybe something what we will talk about when we come to the 3rd session on mindfulness. What's the difference between right mindfulness as taught in the Buddha's teachings and what today we find which is so popular, especially in the West and even in many parts of Asia, in the developed world, what is today increasingly being called secular mindfulness? Is there a difference between secular mindfulness and the right mindfulness which the Buddha talks about, sammasati, in the Noble Eightfold Path? All right. So here, the path to happiness. So the path to happiness is not just to practice meditation, while that is very important. The path to happiness is when we are able to cultivate right views, sammaditthi, right understanding, right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Okay? So always remember, the Buddha gave us the Eightfold Path. The Buddha did not give us one fold path. Right? If the Buddha had only given one fold path, then we can ignore the morality aspects, we can ignore the right view aspects. We just focus on our meditation. All right? So always remember that the Buddha gave us the Eightfold Path. So all the 8 aspects of it are necessary. That is why Bante calls it, there are 8 mindful steps to happiness. Now, he has used the word mindful to give impression that mindfulness encapsulates all the other 8 aspects. Actually, when you dive deeper into the Eightfold Path, you find 3 very important aspects here. One is right views. You must have the right view, because if you don't have the right view, I was some time back, there was this talk by Ajahn Sona. He says one way of looking at the right view is to imagine like when you wake up, when you see the sun coming up. When the sun comes out, the sun illuminates the earth. So that's right view. So if you don't have right view, everything will be in dark, right? So think of the right view as the sun when you wake up. You know, when you take a walk in your park, right? 7:15 when the sun rises in Malaysia, right? Then you find that it illuminates the whole the ground where you're standing. So that's right view. Okay. Then with right view, we are able to have right thoughts, have right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness. We can even have wrong mindfulness. Yeah. Okay. Of course, even though in the Abhidhamma, mindfulness is regarded as a Subhana Chittas, right? But you can also have wrong mindfulness, okay? And concentration. Now, page 25, Bante continues, he says, we walk this path. So the Eightfold Path is not something for us to theorize, it's not something for us to intellectualize. It is something for us to put into practice. Yeah, so that's very important. Okay, so while we may have an intellectual understanding of the Eightfold Path, which is necessary, but we must always put it into practice. That's why he says, we walk this path. And how do we walk this path? By bringing mindful awareness to every aspect of our daily life. All right? Continually working towards greater wholesomeness. All right? Wholesome, that's the other word for kusala, if you like. Yeah? And applying proper understanding. Okay? So you see there are three very important concepts here. We walk this path by bringing mindful awareness. So that's mindfulness must be there, every aspect of daily life. Continually working. That means we must always apply effort. Continuous effort must be there. And effort is also one of the path in the Eightfold Path. Right efforts, isn't it? Right efforts. So you must continually working towards greater wholesomeness. So in other words, when we talk about right effort, it is the effort. I'm not going to go into details, but I'm sure you know effort involves 2 positive aspects and 2 negative aspects, right? How to create conditions for the positive or the wholesome thoughts to arise, and once it's arisen, how do we sustain those wholesome thoughts? That's the positive aspects. And then the negative aspects, how do we ensure that conditions for unwholesomeness do not arise in our thoughts? And if they do arise, how do we overcome them? All right, so it's a continuous effort, continually working toward greater wholesomeness. So that's what is meant here. And applying proper understanding. All right, unfortunately, we do not have time to go into details on what the Buddha actually gave an entire discourse on right mindfulness. So it's not only in the first discourse, it's not only in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta that Buddha mentions the importance of right understanding or sammaditthi. In fact, I think you should make an effort to read this discourse which the Buddha gave. It's called the Sammaditthi Sutta. In others, he gave an entire discourse on what is right view. This is the discourse number 9 in the book of Middle Langsing, Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 9. So there's a Sammaditthi Sutta. So we don't have time to go into that, but please refer to that. Right? So 3 things, yeah? Number 1, mindful awareness. Number 2, continuous effort. And number 3, having right understanding. We'll come to what is meant by right understanding. What should we have right understanding in a short while? Now, as the mind settles down, insights begin to arise. As insights deepen, great faith will arise, where you know that you're on the right path. So you see in the Buddhist perspective of things, great faith or mahasaddha. Great faith will arise when you have actually had some understanding. Initially, when you have no understanding, when someone says, come to Babs to listen to the Dhamma, maybe you just come, all right? And that's faith. But that faith is not called great faith. That faith is not very well rooted, right? That faith doesn't have much roots in it, so it's not strong, right? In the scriptures is known as Amuleka Saddha. In other words, faith that has got no roots. That means easily can be pulled up. But if you come continuously, for example, to the Bab's teachings, and then after a while you listen, you contemplate, you put into practice what you have heard, then you say, hey, what the Buddha says makes a lot of sense. It's something when I practice, I can see the results. Then another level of faith arises. That's called great faith. So the second type of faith, all right, or akaravati saddha, which the Buddha uses, akaravati saddha, that type of faith arises when you have a good understanding of not just the intellectual aspects of the Buddha's teachings, but also the practical applications, where you have actually put it into practice. Okay, so that's what he used. Bhante Ji in his book here uses the word great faith. Okay, so I'm trying to differentiate between what is called ordinary faith, or faith which has got no roots, like, we just come because, our parents asked us to come, or because it's been a tradition that, on Sunday we go to temples. Of course, now you can't go to temples, right? Really, on Sunday you listen to Dhamma talks, all right? But if nothing goes in, so that faith becomes very weak. That faith doesn't have roots. All right, amulika, rootless, right? But if you listen to the talks, you reflect on it, you contemplate on it, and then you put it into practice, then another level of faith arises. That's called great faith, mahasaddha, or akaravati saddha. Okay? So then you know that you're on the right path. Now, page 27, Bhante Ji talks about actions, about skillful and unskillful, right? Now, remember, you can think of this word skillful and unskillful as useful or not useful or useless, right? In one of the very famous teachings which the Buddha gave to a prince, his name is called Prince Abbaya. And the name of the discourse, you can make reference to it after this talk, is called the Abbaya Raja Kumara Sutta. All right, Abbaya Raja Kumara Sutta is also found in the Majjhima Nikaya, where the Buddha was telling this prince that his teachings has got two main characteristics, and maybe one more, three. The first one, his teachings are always true. Number two, his teachings are always useful. Sometimes his teachings can be pleasant to the ears. Sometimes his teachings may not be very pleasant to the ears. But they're always true and they're always useful. Okay? So here, Bhante Ji have preferred the choice of words as skillful, which is wholesome. So here, Bhante Ji, on page 27 of his book, he says, actions may be described as right or wrong, good or bad, moral or immoral, but they convey different meaning to people. So what is good to you may not be good to me. So Bhante Ji prefers the word skillful or unskillful. It's probably a better term. All right, that's his choice of words, okay? Now, the basis of Buddhist philosophy is that acting in unskillful ways lead to unhappy results, and acting in skillful ways lead to happy results. Now, this is basically the law of karma. Now, some of you may be present during this online teachings many months back, where I was invited by Babs to speak on the series of talks on karma, and two very famous discourses which the Buddha gave on karma is called the Lesser Discourse on Karma, if you still remember, if you were at that session many months ago. It's called the Chula Karma Vibhanga Sutta. And the other is the Greater Discourse on Karma, or the Mahakama Vibhanga Sutta. So here, the basis of Buddhist philosophy is that you act in unskillful ways will lead to unhappy results. But if you act in skillful ways, it will lead to happy results. Now, this is what is called the law of karma. So the law of karma is a natural law. It's not a law created by the Buddha, The Buddha discovered it. That is why the topic for today's talk is the Buddha's discovery. The Buddha did not create the law of karma. We must always remember that. If we think the Buddha creates the law of karma, that is the wrong view. Right? The right view is there is this natural law in the universe. It's called the law of karma, which operates in the moral sphere. And basically it says that if you behave in a certain manner, you will have results that will follow you accordingly. And what the Buddha discovered is that negative actions, unskillful actions, unwholesome actions, they lead to unhappy results. And later on, the following slides, you will realize that it's not only in this very life itself, but in future life. Okay, so this is called the law of karma. Now, on page 27, Bhante Ji also has this quote here, which I've summarized here, page 27. He says that, you may think, I'm not worried about a future lifetime. I just want what I can get out of this life. Then the Buddha advises to consider these possibilities. Now, actually, Bhante Ji is quoting from the Apanaka Sutra. All right, the Apanaka Sutra is a very interesting sutta. If you want to get more details, you can read it. It's on Majjhima Nikaya Sutta 60. It's been translated as the incontrovertible. Right? I think, not sure, was it Bhikkhu Bodhi or Achantani Saro who also translated it as the sure bet, DET bet. So basically what this Apanaka Sutta says, or the Apanaka Sutta is about the Buddha was teaching a group of uncommitted group of householders, actually the Brahmins of Sala, how to use a rational reflection to arrive at practices and principles that are guaranteed to have a good outcome, even if we don't know all the variables. All right. So I've used the heading as a wager. All right. If that's okay, this is what the Apanaka, I'm just summarizing here. This is also from Bhante Ji's book, page 27. If there is no future life, doing good actions will bring me happiness and a clear conscience in this life. Okay, you're clear with that? But if there is a future life beyond death, I will be doubly rewarded, now and again later. All right. Then the second paragraph says, if there's no future life, doing bad actions will make me feel miserable and guilty in this life. But if it turns out there is a future life beyond death, I will suffer again later. Or as we say, then you'll be in terrible action. So this is called a wager. Right? If there's no future life, doesn't matter. Even if there's no future life, you do good, you bring you happiness and a clear conscience in this. But if there's a future life, then you'll be rewarded now and again. And then if there's no future life, you do bad things, you make you feel miserable, make you feel guilty. All right? But if it turns out there is a future life beyond death, you will suffer again. Okay? Now, you must understand this. The Buddha was giving this discourse to a group of uncommitted householders. But of course, in many other discourses, what the Buddha was trying to say is there is future life. Okay, so this is just to kind of a wager, right? You know the meaning, right? A wager. So then Bhante Ji continues on page 27, 28. He talks about how karma works. So remember, as I said, the first thing to remember about right understanding is that actions have consequences. So that's karma. So once we understand that everything we think, say, or do is a cause that leads inevitably to some effect now or in the future, we will naturally want to think, say, and do things that lead to positive results and avoid those thoughts, words, and deeds that lead to negative results. Recognizing that causes always leads to results help us to accept the consequences of past actions. It helps us in making choice that leads to a happy future. There's a lot of stuff in this paragraph. In fact, we can have a whole Dhamma talk just on this paragraph itself. All right. So it's a very concise and very profound paragraph here on page 27, 28. Let me try to unpack this a little bit. Yeah. Once we understand that everything we think, say, or do is a cause that leads inevitably to some effect, now or in the future, we will naturally want to think, say, and do things that lead to positive results and avoid those thoughts, words, and deeds that lead to negative ones. One sentence. This one basically says that our actions manifest in 3 doors. Basically, karma manifests in 3 doors, and it starts with intention, our intention. All right. In the Buddha's discourse, in the scriptures, you can find this mentioned in the Nibbedika Sutta. All right. In the Nibbedika Sutta, the Buddha says, what is karma? Karma is cetana. Karma is intentions. All right. And intentions, through our intentions, we perform actions. And actions are performed through the body, through speech, and through the mind. Okay? And all these actions will have results. And when do these results manifest themselves? They manifest now or in the future. All right? So we naturally, therefore, want to do things, say things, and think about things that are positive in results, that will lead to positive results. And you avoid those that are negative in nature. So to use Bhante Ji's words, you do what is skillful through your body, through your speech, and through your mind. And you avoid what is unskillful. So when you recognize this, then you recognize that every action that arises has a cause, which means causes have consequences. Okay? So as I said, it's a very profound paragraph here, even though there are 2 sentences. Okay? Now, he gives examples on page 28. What are those skillful actions? Are those that create the causes of happiness, such as actions motivated by loving kindness and compassion. So if your thoughts are rooted in loving kindness and compassion, all right, those are considered as wholesome actions, skillful actions. Any action that comes from a mind not currently filled with greed, hatred, or delusion brings happiness to the doer and the receiver. And of course, the reverse is true. So the other way of explaining this is skillful actions are actions which are not rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. Whereas an unskillful action are actions which are rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. So those will be defined as unskillful actions. Okay? Now, just now, Bhante Ji talks about compassion and love. So just a slide here to remind us the slight differentiation between compassion and love. So love is just, or loving kindness is just a wish for another well-being, to have well-being and happiness. The wishing for another person to be happy. Whereas compassion is a wish for another being to be free from suffering. And usually, as a result of our compassion, we put in our compassion into action. Now, it is also said that, as I mentioned, because every action has consequences, so a positive behavior generates 2 types of immediate results. Internally, how you feel about your actions, and externally, how others feel about your actions. If you perform an action based on greed or hate or ignorance, how do you think other people will feel about your actions? They don't feel good either. All right? And usually you will not feel good about it either. Okay? Now, the positive actions, the unskillful actions. Now, on page 28, Bhante Ji actually talks about the 10 unwholesome actions. So I put them into a table form. Actually, this is an extract from a very important discourse which the Buddha gave, which I hope you will also make reference to after this talk, which is called the Saleyaka Sutta. The Saleyaka Sutta, just like the Apanaka Sutra, was actually preached by the Buddha to the same Brahmins of Sala. Right? So in the Saleyaka Sutta, what the Buddha explains to this group of householders called the Brahmins of Sala is that what actions is it that when we perform will lead to results which are negative in nature, leads to suffering, not just in this life, but in future lives. All right? So he divides it into the 10 unwholesome actions. which are divided into body, speech, and mind. So I'm not going to go into details, but I just give you this table here. So by body, we're talking about killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. So this is you're familiar with. You recited this morning in the 5 precepts. You make that that training rule to say that to prevent or to refrain from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. This morning you also make that you also observe 5 precepts to abstain from lying. Under the category of speech in the 10 unwholesome actions, the nature of speech has been expanded to include also malicious speech, harsh speech, and useless talk. So it's just not a case of not lying, but also a case of refraining from malicious talks, harsh speech, and useless talk. And in the mind aspects, it will be to refrain from covetousness, ill will, and wrong view. So you see the word wrong view again appears here. So that comes from the mind. All right. So these 10 things, and in the Saleyaka Sutta, the Buddha told the Brahmins of Sala that whoever abstained from all these 10 unwholesome actions, but instead performs its opposites, such as instead of killing, he performs love and compassion; instead of stealing, he performs generosity; instead of lying, he performs telling the truth, and so on. Then he will be reborn in the Deva realm. He will have a rebirth in heavens. Okay, so it's an interesting discourse. So you want to know how to be born in the heavens, in the heavenly realms, then please read the Saleyaka Sutta, right, which is Sutta number 41, Book of Middle Length Saying. So in Banteji's book, he talks about this, right, on page 28. Now, then he brings in the topic of mindfulness, and he says that mindfulness meditation increases our awareness of the devastating consequences of immoral behavior. Right? If you still remember one of the earlier slides, I mentioned about the need to be mindful, and then always to have a constant effort, and thirdly, to have mindfulness been rooted in right views. Okay? So here the meditator vividly experiences the painful effects of unwholesome thoughts, words, and deeds, and urgently feels the need to give them all up. Okay? So here we talk about the importance of mindfulness. But obviously, if you have studied the teachings, you find that the Buddha was also very explicit that while mindfulness is important, but mindfulness alone is also inadequate. That is why, for example, in the Satipatthana Sutta, in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 10, the Buddha talks about 2 other things that we need to have. So it's not just mindfulness, which is satima, but we must also have clear comprehension. All right, and we must be ardent. All right, now mindfulness, we know we will talk about in our 3rd session. And then here in the Satipatthana Sutta, Buddha talks about you need 2 other things. You need to be ardent. Now, what do you mean by being ardent? Now, ardent obviously means to be very enthusiastic about things, always making efforts to do it. All right, so that's the importance of being keen, being passionate about it. All right, so and then you have clear comprehension. Now, I'm not going to go into details, but the clear comprehension, if you read the Satipatthana Sutta, and then on the commentaries, it talks about we must know why it is the purpose. Why? Is it beneficial? And then is it suitable? Is it the right time? Is it the domain of being mindful, being meditation? And then is it rooted in clear understanding? All right? So all these 3 must be there. Right? Maybe this could be the topic for another session where we talk about what it means by being mindful. Like, for example, clear comprehension. When we want to talk, when I will touch a little bit in the 3rd session, when we are clear with the purpose why we are doing mindfulness, it is not just to become more successful in our business. It's not just so that we are more skillful in our worldly life, but also in the spiritual aspects, and so that we are more so that we know how to benefit others. All right, how to bring benefit not just to ourselves but also to others. Okay, so when you do all these things, then you create what is called wise attention. Right. So that is just a little an extension of what is found in the Satipatthana Sutta. Now, when we talk about mindful behavior, I'm always reminded of this very wonderful teaching from Atisha in the Bodhisattva's Garland of Gems. You know, this is one of the texts that has a profound impact in my understanding and also in my practice, right? And wherever I find that I'm straying, you know, I try to remind ourselves verse 28 by Atisha, where he says, when in the midst of many, let me keep a check on my speech. When remaining alone, let me keep a check on my mind. So when we are in the midst of many people, sometimes we get so taken away, you know, in our conversation with people, we just end up, you know, talking and we forgot what we are talking about. We forgot the mindfulness aspects of what we say. All right. So here Atisha tells us, when you are in the midst of many people, always remember, keep a check on your speech. Be very careful. Does your speech, is it hurtful? Is it malicious? Is it slanderous? All right. Nowadays, you know, you find a lot of, especially in social media, isn't it? Right. People will be forwarding a lot of so-called, you know, messages, and many of which are fake. Right. And then we participate, we end up talking about all those things, right? In our WhatsApp chat. So we got to be very careful about all those things. So remember what Atisha said, when you're in the midst of many people, when you're talking to many people, always remember to check on your speech, right? But even when you're alone, your mind can be like a monkey mind. So you must, when remain alone, let me keep a check on my mind, right? Two very pithy sayings, pithy, P-I-T-H-Y, pithy. Two very pithy phrase, and I think it's a good reminder, okay? Okay, finally, just one or two more slides before I end. It's on page 29. Here, Bhante Ji says, you alone are the author of your future. And experience teaches you that. Your behavior is not an unchangeable law of nature. So you can change your behavior, right? Your behavior is what I mentioned early on, the mindful behavior. How do we develop that mindful behavior? So here, Bhante Ji says, your behavior is not an unchangeable law of nature. At every moment, you have the opportunity to change, to alter your thoughts, your speech, your action. How do we do that? If you train your mind to be mindful of what you do. So we need to train ourselves, and that's what is called effort, isn't it? All right? This morning, when you recite the 5 precepts, it's also a form of training, right? Isn't it? For example, your first precept, you say, Panati Pata Veramati Sikha Padang Samadhiyami. The word is Sikha. What does the word Sikha in the first precept mean? It means train, a Sikha. So a Sikha is a trainee. So we are all trainees. We are all training ourselves. We are training ourselves to be mindful in what we do. Okay? So when you recite the first precept or the second precept or the third precept, one key word to remember is the Pali word Sikha. I mean, we are all trainees. We are all training ourselves. So if you train yourself to be mindful of what you do and ask yourself whether it's likely to lead to positive results or negative results, you'll be guiding yourself in the right direction. Okay? So that is why the Buddha talks about, this is the wisdom part, right? So Buddha says, how do we develop wisdom? First, we study the Dhamma. After we study the Dhamma, then we think about the Dhamma, or we reflect in the Dhamma. And then we meditate on the Dhamma. And then we get 3 levels of wisdom. So the first level is when you just listen to the Dhamma, it's called Sutta Maya Panya. Sutta Maya Panya. That means you just listen to the Dhamma, which is good, of course, but not good enough. Right? Whatever you listen, you have to reflect. And then once you reflect, all right, or you analyze, like in the Tibetan tradition, we do a lot of analytical meditation. So you analyze, all right? You not only listen to what you have heard, you analyze it. For example, you analyze, what are the 4 things that turns the mind towards Dharma? So you analyze the 4 things, okay? When you analyze it, you get the second level of wisdom. It's called Cinta Maya Panya. But even that is not good enough. You have to meditate on it. You have to put into practice. You have to realize it. All right? You have to realize it. So that is called the bhavana maya panya. That's where the word bhavana, mental cultivation or meditation. All right. So it starts with like what we are all doing today, trying to listen to the Dhamma. Right. So if you train yourself to be mindful of what you do and ask yourself whether it's likely to lead to positive results or negative results. So you have to ask yourself, you have to contemplate. For example, today you recite the 5 precepts. All right. You have to reflect. Why 5 precepts? Why should I observe the 5 precepts? Why do I need to abstain from harming sentient beings? Why should I abstain from taking things which are not given? Then you reflect on it. Once you reflect on it, then it will likely, you will realize that, this is something positive. And then because you have right understanding, you have right views about things, you understand that right or positive results or positive actions, skillful actions will lead to skillful results or positive results. And how do you know it? Then you read, for example, the Apanaka Sutra, which I mentioned just now, right? The 10 things that Bhanteji mentioned in his book that we should avoid. And of course, there's a reverse of 10 things that we should put into practice. So at the end of the day, you are responsible, okay? Because we are responsible for our actions. Then he talks about inner motivation on page 29. So repeated good intentions can generate a powerful inner voice that will keep you on track. So if you do it long enough, all right, so this is what we call, you develop habitual karma, repeated good intention. You see, remember I mentioned just now in the Nibbedika Sutta, the Buddha says, what is karma? Or what is karma? Yes, karma is intention, isn't it? So if you have repeated good intentions, it will generate a powerful inner voice that will keep you on track. And what is this powerful inner voice? This is the anusayas, the tendencies, all right? The tendencies, the positive tendencies that will keep you on track. These positive anusayas or tendencies will remind you wherever you are trapped, wherever you trap yourself in a cycle of unhappiness, that you can get out of that trap. When you are unhappy, all right, when now you feel very agitated, very anxious, very worrisome, that when is this COVID-19 going to end? COVID-19 doesn't seem to be in retreat, all right? It doesn't seem to go away. Every day, 5 p.m., you look at the online news, you find that the numbers keep on increasing, isn't it? From 6,000 before EMCO, then we are no more in EMCO now, we are in first phase of the recovery. The numbers shoot up to 13,000, then 15,000, and yesterday was 15,900. So we do not know when we're going to hit 20,000. So we get very agitated, we get very unhappy about it. What can we do about it? Of course, we can take care of ourselves. That's the best that we can, get ourselves vaccinated, right? We can do all those things. But other than that, let's let it be, all right? Because nothing is certain, isn't it? All right. So periodically, you will have glimpses of what is likely to be free. Right? You will make this vision a reality by acting in positive ways and letting go of misery. Thus, morality is the foundation of all spiritual progress. So ultimately, it is what is most important.
Somebody's call and I'm tuning with the.
Okay, right. Okay, yeah. So somebody is also talking there. So morality is the foundation of all spiritual progress. Okay, practice. So real practice should not be separated from living, and living at all times should be one's practice. So proper practice includes cultivating kindness, compassion, mindfulness, and wisdom. So you think less about oneself and more about others. So be aware of your changing mental and physical conditions and environment. So again, 3 things are very important. One is being mindful about what's happening and always making the effort to be mindful and having right views. Okay, and having right views of kindness and compassion. All right, so these are 2 very important aspects. So conclusion, always check our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Why? Back to what I mentioned right at the beginning, all actions have consequences, number 1. And number 2, Some actions are skillful, some actions are not skillful. And the Buddha's discovery tells us that skillful actions lead to skillful or wholesome or happy results. And unskillful actions or unwholesome actions lead to unhappy results. So in all our actions, we should reflect on whether our intentions are beneficial to ourselves and others. So in this way, we will check ourselves before we act. And if we put other sentient beings before ourselves, those selfish feelings will not arise as much. Okay? So that concludes this first part. As I said, I'm not doing much justice to the topic of right views. So my suggestion is twofold. One is, please read this book. It's called 8 Mindful Steps to Happiness, and you find a very detailed explanation of what is right, or what Bhante Ji calls skillful understanding. And secondly, if you can Google this discourse which the Buddha gave called Samma Ditti Sutta. All right, Samma Ditti Sutta, or the discourse on right views, right understanding. Okay, so I think we have about 25 minutes. All right, so I welcome any questions if you have, or any comments you'd like to add on. Okay, thank you. So I'll pass it back to Ida.
Thank you, Brother Benny. Now we open the floor to questions and answers. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the Zoom chat, or if you're tuning in live from Facebook, you can leave it in the comment section on Facebook as well. We have a question from Leong Yu Ming on Facebook. What is right knowledge? Can Brother Benny Liow please elaborate on this right knowledge? Thank you, Metta.
Okay. Well, the words are basically used quite interchangeably. All right. Sometimes we use the word knowledge. In Pali, it's called vijja. All right, vijja. So knowledge. But usually we like to think knowledge as just from knowledge. How do we translate knowledge into wisdom? Okay. So knowledge, when it is not applied, it is just pure knowledge. Whereas in the Buddha's teachings, knowledge should always be applied in our everyday life. Okay, so when knowledge is applied in a positive way, in a skillful way, then it becomes wisdom. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. But there are two. But these words are used quite interchangeably, right?
Thank you, Brother Benny. Hope that answers your question, Leong Yu Ming. We have another question from Hai Eng Yu from the Facebook. Can wrong mindfulness lead to depression and finally madness? How do we escape from wrong mindfulness as a married career layman in our daily worldly life when dealing with challenges of life?
Okay. Well, mindfulness by itself is, as I mentioned, if you have, is considered as a wholesome chitta. It's a subhana chitta. But sometimes we can have wrong mindfulness in the sense that when it is not based on right understanding. Okay, I'm sure now you must have read, like in the U.S. Army, for example, they are teaching the soldiers, the snipers, right, mindfulness. Why? So that they become sharpshooters. Right. So that's not the type of mindfulness that is taught by the Buddha, but it can make you very efficient, isn't it? It can make you very skillful in a wrong way. Okay, so that type of mindfulness is not the type of mindfulness taught by the Buddha. All right. So if you have mindfulness, if you practice mindfulness, and then your mindfulness is based on right views, all right, and right views, as we said, for example, we said right views. We understand two things: that the right views that all our actions, all right, mindfulness is an action, right? So all our actions have consequences. So if we are very mindful in only trying to be successful in our business, well, we can be very successful. But if we don't have right understanding or right views about the nature of the business that we are in, because our business is samsaric in the sense, isn't it? It will not be permanent. All right, it may be successful, it may not be successful. All right. So when it is not successful, do we have that right view that everything is uncertain? Even our own business is uncertain. Our success is uncertain. All right. But that does not mean that we do not aim to be successful. That doesn't mean that we don't strive to be successful. We strive to be successful, but in the right way. Okay. So that's where the Eightfold Path talks about the morality aspects. So the next session, we're going to talk about being ethical, all right? For example, in some of the discourses which the Buddha gave to lay people, like in the Dikajanu Sutta, in the Apanaka Sutra, right? The Buddha told to Dikajanu, for example, how can you be successful? How can you be very efficient in your work? And how can you make a lot of money? All right. And he says, if you want to make a lot of money, it must be through righteous means. All right. And in order to be successful in whatever you do, you've got to be mindful. All right. You must have faith. You must have mindfulness. You must be diligent. Right. You must have concentration. So all those things the Buddha talks about. But do not forget the Eightfold Path, which is the ethical dimension, the morality aspect. So if we have that morality, the morality aspects in whatever we do, when we do something, we know that our action is not going to cause harm to other people. In the Buddha's teachings, he talk about right livelihood. If in our business we use mindfulness and we become very successful in our business, but the nature of our business is such that it harms other people, then is that number one, it's not right livelihood. Number two, it is against the very essence of the ethical foundation that the Eightfold Path is on. Okay? All right? But we'll talk a little bit more about that. In the third section on mindfulness. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Benny. We have another two-part question from Hai Eng. Is it bad karma to share news that turns out to be fake, even though we have no evil intention when sharing? And how can right mindfulness guide us in being more alert when sharing news before it becomes habitual karma?
Well, again, I refer you to the Nibbedika Sutta, where the Buddha says, what is karma? Karma is intention, right? Cetana. All right, so that's where the Buddha stated very clearly, right? So it's our intention. If you know it's a fake news, and then you circulate it, then obviously, you're not doing the right thing, isn't it? All right. But you do not know it's a fake news. But then when you read that piece of information, and you know that if you circulate that piece of news, what is going to happen is just going to create more anger and more hate in other people's mind. All right? Then should you do that? All right? Even if it is true, for example, even if it is true, if you're mindful, you ask yourself before you forward this news. I just give you an example. Just 3 days ago, all of us have this WhatsApp chat group, right? So someone posted this news or this photo about hundreds of people, in mass prayers, right? And it's quite obvious that this happened pre-COVID, right? So when this was forwarded to me, my first question to him was, do you know when this happened? And the guy said, oh, not sure. And I said, there's a little date there. The date shows that it's 2017. He said, oh, yeah, it's 2017. I said, what is your intention of circulating this? Number one, it's not true. You circulate this, it's going to make a lot of people have more thoughts of anger and say, why this community, do this? What purpose does it serve? What purpose does it serve? All right. Isn't it? So, as just now that I mentioned to you in the Buddha's teachings, in the Abbaya Raja Kumara Sutta, the Buddha only says something or teach something when it is true, when it is useful. All right? When it is true, when it is useful. Of course, sometimes certain thing is useful. It may be unpleasant. Yes, you want to express it. If it's pleasant, by all means, you say it. Okay, so that's a very important teaching which the Buddha gave in the Abbaya Raja Kumara Sutta. But there's another discourse which the Buddha gave about speech, or about what we want to tell other people, is the timeliness. Whether is it timely or not timely. Just now in the in that slide on the on sampajana, on clear comprehension, right? In the commentaries, there are 4 things that's been explained, right? The first one is purpose. The second one is suitability. In other words, is it suitable to say it at this point in time? Maybe not suitable. You wait, even though it is true. All right. Now, this one the Buddha gave in the Vassa Sutta. Right. So you can read all these things in the Sutta. Don't just listen to what I say. I gave you the source. So please refer to the sources. It's called the Vassa Sutta. Vaca. Vassa means speech. So the Buddha said, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to communicate, always check. Is it true? Is it useful? Is it timely? All right. So for us to circulate those things that all those WhatsApp chats, so always be mindful. Always be very mindful. Is it worth circulating? But when you circulate it, what is your intention? Why do you want to circulate? If it is true, if it is useful, all right, circulate it. Okay.
Thank you again. This question comes from H.M. Ng in Zoom. Brother Benny, in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, why is feeling, which is part of the mind, and the mind are 2 separate foundations of mindfulness. By practicing mindfulness on the mind, isn't it already included in mindfulness of the feeling, or is it a duplicate?
Well, the word feeling in the 4 foundations of mindfulness is very specific. It's a very technical. It basically refers to feelings which is painful, which is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Okay, so it's quite different from our definitions of emotions. All right, so the emotions part, it is more under the mind aspect. Okay, so it has got a technical definition there for feeling Vedana. So Vedana in Buddhism specifically refers to any action which is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Of course, from the body into the mind. Okay, but when we talk about contemplation on the mind, right? So then we go into greater aspects, right? Okay, we will touch a little bit on that when we come to the 3rd session. Okay?
Thank you. This next question comes from Veena. If we want to be more skillful in our thought, speech, and action, would metta meditation be preferable for beginners rather than on the breath?
Well, there are different meditation techniques, right? Metta meditation, of course, it is said to be very good. For example, if we want to overcome the hateful thoughts that we have, the anger thoughts that we have, so that becomes a good countermeasures. Okay, the breathing in, breathing out, the one helps us to in fact that helps us to calm the mind. It helps us to calm the mind. In fact, in whatever meditation methods, whether you're doing metta meditation, you're doing anapanasati, you're doing analytical meditation, it's always good to start with breathing in, breathing out, all right, and because that will actually help. Like for example, in the Tibetan side, about the Lamrim meditation. So even in Lamrim meditation, there's an advice that before you even start with Lamrim meditation, you start by breathing in, breathing out for I think 21 times. So you do the breathing. So that basically helps you to calm the mind. So I think the breathing, taking in a deep breath, and then the deep breath, breathing in, breathing out. So that helps a lot. So that helps to calm the mind. Okay?
Thank you again. This is the final question from Leong Yuming on Facebook again. How does one skillfully change the unskillful attitude and wrong view without clear comprehension of one who is ignorant and unwise? Thank you and metta.
Well, the whole Buddhist practice is trying to achieve that, right? Obviously, I have not achieved that. So I'm still in the process of doing that. But the key is we are all in the process of unpacking all our conditioning, isn't it? Right? That's why we all start by having the right views about things. And how do we have the right views about things? First, we try to understand that our actions have consequences. Okay, so we try to understand the law of karma. We try to understand the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths actually is about cause and effect. Right? So when we try to understand all these things, we realize that everything is cause and effect. All right. Then we begin to realize, now, so what kind of causes should I create? What kind of causes should I not create? If I'm mindful enough, if I have sufficient wisdom, if I have sufficient habitual karma to do good, to avoid evil, then I begin to do less and less of those actions which will lead to painful results, unskillful results, isn't it? It's a whole process, right? So it starts with, for example, as ordinary, simple lay Buddhists, we start with 5 precepts, right? So that's why to all of us, the 5 precepts are very important. But we should not look at the 5 precepts as pure rituals, that we only observe 5 precepts once a week on Sunday. All right. So I told you that the key word in the 5 precepts is this word sikha. Remember? Panatipata viramatni sikha padang samadhyami. So always remind ourselves, sikha, we are training. We are not perfect. Right? But if we start thinking that, oh, I'm already perfect, probably you are not. Okay. So very important for us to do that. And I always also reminded what Suzuki Roshi says, we always adopt what is called the beginner's mind. Right? Suzuki Roshi. Right? He wrote a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. So we always adopt that beginner's mind. Yes, we have learned so much, we have practiced so much, there's still much more that we do not know, there's still much more for us to practice. Right? That is called a beginner's mind. The moment you think, oh, 4 Noble Truths, I already know 4 Noble Truths. Eightfold Path, so there's how many years I've been studying Eightfold Path. I only want to learn meditation, attain jhanas. I only want to have high states. That is great, of course. But always important, all right, that the fundamentals, the basic fundamentals, your precepts. If your precepts are not strong, all right, if your precepts are not firmly anchored, all right, no matter what kind of meditation that you have, you may end up to be very full of pride, ego. And always remember this word mana, M-A-N-A, mana. It's not Malay word, well, probably that's a Malay word, mana, but mana. All right, that ego, even at the stage of the arahant, then we eradicate that. So always have the beginner's mind. Always tell yourself that, yes, I've learned, but there's still much more that I can learn, that I need to learn, to improve myself. That should be our spirit. Right view. Yeah, have I understood everything? No, I don't think we have understood everything. The more we think we understand, there's more that we see it from different angles. All right? We learn from different angles. Okay? All right, so I think we are all at different stages of improving ourselves. So we learn to check ourselves. So as I said, the best is, this slide. When in the midst of many, let me keep a check on my speech, what you say. Because in life, we are sentient beings, we are human beings, we love to talk, isn't it? All right, that's why the 10 unwholesome actions, you find that speech has got 4. It has got more. Right? But when you're alone, don't think that nobody knows what you're thinking. Only you yourself know. So when remaining alone, let me keep a check on my mind. So I think this is a wonderful, this verse 28 from Atisha, right? So, okay. So please, I hope this short session here has been useful, and whatever has been useful, please keep with you. Please keep it with you. Whatever you find not useful, please leave it behind. Okay. Thank you very much, and may all of you be well and happy.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Brother Benny, for that Dharma sharing. We actually have 2 more questions, but I think we will. Oh, do we want to continue?
We have another 5 minutes.
Yeah. So
time is
there's
a concept anyway, right? Time is a concept, isn't it? Okay.
Yes, we have 2 really quick ones. One is from Chiam. He says that the mind is complicated. Yes. Skillful actions give rise to good results and good feeling to many. But to some, knowing well themselves, doing unskillful actions might result in unwholesome results. But they feel good and enjoyable, kind of barbaric nature. They may at times feel remorse, but a lot more time enjoy their actions. That's why we see so many cruel actions in the world. How to change them?
Well, sometimes, people bring with them from their past lives, the past conditioning. Very difficult to change those conditioning, right? Some of those people, we try to change them, you may not be able to change them, right? Instead, you're not careful, you may get changed by them, all right? So that's one thing. But if you are someone who is very strong in your practice, you have this great bodhisattva spirit, then you should try to change the other person's behavior from your own actions. All right. I think the best way is for somebody to see how you behave. All right. For example, if you really believe in the practice of being ethical, the concept of morality, so you will put that into practice. In other words, you hold strong your firm belief that these are things which are good because of your mahasaddha, of your strong faith in the Buddha's teachings, that you know that this is what will happen. All right. For example, people may feel terrible over this COVID, but you are always in a state of calmness. Now, why? Because you tell yourself that, look, everything is impermanent, everything is uncertain. So likewise, even the unwholesome, even the difficulties in life, even COVID-19 is not going to be there forever. It will change. A group in Singapore was asking me, can I give them a verse or phrase that will really inspire them not to give up? So I was thinking where to get, and I remembered His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave a speech to Time magazine. It was last year, and in that dialogue, or in that interview with Time magazine, His Holiness says that in his life he has seen a lot of suffering. He has seen a lot of up and down. He has also read a lot about suffering and all these things, but he believed in the law of impermanence. That, like everything else, good things, likewise bad things, they will also change. Right? So I thought that was really marvelous, And His Holiness, you used to say the wonderful thing about our defilements. What is so wonderful about our defilements is that they are changeable. They can be changed. They can be transformed. And how do we know it? Today, the science of neuroplasticity tells us that our mind is malleable. And Richard Davidson, Daniel Goleman, they are doing a lot of research to show that how actually we can change our mind. Question is, do we want to change? If we want to change, we can change. So sessions like Dhamma Talks, organizations like Bob's, we can only provide the avenue. We can provide the conditions for people to come. All right. So if we have a friend who we think should have some exposure to some of these teachings, we invite him to come. All right. Then hopefully, it will stay. It's like a seed, It's like a seed. So we do not know when that seed will germinate. But through constant, cause and effect, so eventually the seed may ripen. So we can only do that much, but we continue to do that. Okay.
Thank you,
last
Brother
question.
Benny. Yes, last question from Hai Eng Yu. Is it bad karma to continue to support a monk who has not realized he has deviated from the practice of Buddha teachings?
Okay. Yeah, I thought you stopped at is it bad karma to support a monk? I thought you stopped at that. So support a monk who has not realized and who has committed a lot of bad things, is it?
Yeah, who has deviated from the practice of Buddha teachings.
Okay, I think there are two ways of looking at it. One is if we know that this monk is not following the Buddha's teachings, he's like what you call a fake monk, right? Or he's doing a lot of bad things in the name of Buddhism. Number one, in the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha says one should avoid such people. Avoiding them doesn't mean you go and badmouth them and curse them and say, hey monk, when you die, you're going to be born in Avicii hell. The spirit that you're going to talk to him. By his own action, he's going to suffer for his own actions anyway. But you don't have to. But in fact, what arises in your mind, not anger, but compassion. Compassion arises in your mind. All right, that for this monk, and also you may still try your best if it's possible. If you are close to him, for example, and you know him, you can say, look, you can say, why you shouldn't be doing that. That's not right. But if he's not going to listen to you, so you can't bring a horse to drink water and the horse refuses to drink the water, right? So you just have to let him be. Okay, but you can sympathize. You can have compassion for him, and you can pray for his well-being. Right? You can pray for his well-being, and whenever there are occasions, you try to create conditions where he will see what is the true Dhamma. Right? If he has got a preceptor, maybe you try to actually share with his preceptor. But if the preceptor also say, I've given up on him, I suppose there's not much you can do. Right? But most probably such type of monks, don't even go back to their preceptor. So I think that the key is we don't have to support such monks, but we don't have to be malicious towards them. We don't have to slander them. We don't have to curse them. We just let them be. But if they come to you and ask, can I have some food? Then you give them food. If they want food, you give them food. There's nothing wrong. It's better to give than to receive, as Master Singin says, right, in his story, right? So you give, he asks you for food. You give. If he asks you for money, then you say, I think I don't want to give you money because I don't want you to break your precept. Because if you are, especially if it's a Theravada monk, you can tell him your Vinaya says that you're not supposed to handle money. I'm not going to give you money, but I don't want you to break your precept. But you need money to buy food, I'll give you food. Isn't it? I've got a friend who, when he meets these fake monks in the Pasar Malam with the bowl, when they ask for money to put in his bowl, and he will say, oh, you want? I give food. I will not give you money and not put in your bowl. So he's trying to send a message over to him. You see, so there are different ways how we can try to explain to this person that what he's doing is not right. It's not in accordance with the Vinaya. And because he wears the robes of a monk, the karmic repercussion, remember, every action has consequences, right view. So the karmic consequences will be even more terrible for him. Right? You don't have to add on to that. Okay, you try to reduce that. You try to bring him out if you can, like a good bodhisattva, right? If you can. Sometimes it's not so easy. But our intention is very important. Our intention is our compassion. We want to help him. Our intention is we want him to follow the right path. Okay?
Thank you so much again, Brother Benny, for sharing the Dhamma with us. Let us show our gratitude and appreciation to Brother Benny by saying sadhu 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, 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 sadhu.